Welcome back. Sorry for the late 2 weeks, 2 and 3 weeks, almost 3 weeks, not doing any videos on YouTube. I've been busy at my job and other personal stuff in my life. But that's another story for another time. Don't want to cry on the video. Let's get to the video. What if I tell you there's a bear so terrifying that it makes the panda bear, makes the polar bear, the grizzly bear, the black bear, the Kodiak bear, all look like little panda bears. This bear stands 15 feet tall, weighing from 3 tons and 10 tons. Massive claws, big as a pizza, tray of pizza, and everything. And it was the one bear that kept all people from coming over here in North America back during the Ice Age. If you know what I'm talking about, it's a short-faced bear. One of the biggest predatory animals in North America. Let that sink in. A bear, 15 feet tall. Bigger than a grizzly bear. Bigger than a polar bear. Polar bears are 12 foot tall. Weighing close to 1,000 pounds. But what's the dangerous thing about the short-faced bear is this. It can run at full speed for its size. So let's go ahead and get into the video. Enjoy.
You're stranded in the middle of the Ice Age. You'd probably expect the ultimate threat to be a pack of direwolves, or maybe a saber-toothed tiger. But the absolute worst thing you could possibly encounter here is a bear. But not just any bear, because this bear didn't eat berries. It ate... This is the short-faced bear. But why did evolution take a perfectly normal omnivore and force it to become a hyper-aggressive giant? And if it truly was this unstoppable, what actually wiped it out? Well, before we look at what the short-faced bear actually was, we have to clear up a pretty major misconception about prehistoric bears. When most people think of a terrifying Ice Age bear, they immediately think of the cave bear. It's a famous name, it sounds incredibly intimidating, and they lived all across Europe and Asia. When you hear the words cave bear, you imagine a bloodthirsty monster dragging Neanderthals into the dark. Except, they were just giant vegetarians. Their teeth actually look like this. They're completely flat and worn down. They didn't have the shearing teeth required to slice through meat and bone. Their mouths were designed almost entirely for grinding up tough roots, tubers, and berries. They were huge, yes, but they spent their entire lives foraging for plants and hibernating in caves, which is actually how they got their name, since thousands of them died peacefully in their sleep during hibernation. So, if you were an early human living in Europe, the cave bear was definitely large enough to kill you if you annoyed it, but it wasn't actively trying to hunt you or looking at you going, finally, dinner. It just wanted you to get out of its cave. Europe had a giant herbivore. North America was hiding an actual giant meat-eater, and its proportions were straight up disturbing. So just how big was the short-faced bear? To understand the scale of this animal, you have to look at how a normal bear is built. If a modern polar bear, the largest bear alive today, stands on all 4 of its legs, its shoulder height comes up to about 4 or maybe 5 feet. If you're an average-sized adult human, you're looking down at the top of the polar bear's head when it's walking normally. The short-faced bear didn't have this proportion. When a short-faced bear stood on all 4 legs, its shoulder height was over 5.5 feet tall. Add the neck and the head, and this means that if you were standing perfectly straight, a short-faced bear on all 4s wouldn't be down on your waist. You'd just be staring straight across, directly into its eyes. And if it decided to stand up on its hind legs to get a better look at you, it reached up to 12 feet tall. If you were standing in a normal living room and a short-faced bear stood up, its head would crash straight through your ceiling. Which, good luck explaining that to your madman. It weighed roughly 2,000 pounds, making it more than double the weight of a large modern grizzly. But being tall doesn't actually kill prey. If you want to see why this thing was so deadly, you have to look at its skull. If you look at the face of a black bear or a brown bear today, the first thing you'll probably notice, besides the teeth, is that they have an elongated snout. Their faces are stretched outward, almost like a dog. The long snout is highly functional. It gives them a massive nasal cavity, which is why modern bears have some of the best senses of smell in the entire animal kingdom. They use that long nose to snuff out grubs under logs, berries on bushes, or a dead fish washed up on a riverbank from miles away. The short-faced bear completely abandoned this design. Its face actually looked like, yeah, this. It was completely pushed in, which is exactly where it gets the name short-faced bear. But why would evolution compress the face of a bear? It all comes down to basic leverage. If you have a long snout and you bite down on something at the very tip of your mouth, you lose a lot of crushing power. It's the exact same physics as holding out a heavy weight straight out in front of you with your arms fully extended. It's difficult and you have no leverage. But to bring that weight in close to your chest, suddenly you have way more power. By shortening the snout, the short-faced bear brought its canine teeth much closer to the actual jaw hinge and the massive muscles anchoring its head. This means that when it bit down, it wasn't just grabbing its prey. It was delivering an insane amount of crushing force directly into the bone. If you look at the shortened face and the wide cheekbones, it operated much closer to the skull of a giant lion. And there's a very specific reason why its head was built to kill like a big cat. Modern bears are omnivores. In fact, for most grizzlies and black bears, meat makes up a surprisingly small percentage of their total diet. They spend the vast majority of their waking hours eating grass, roots, pine nuts, and berries. They're opportunists. If they find a dead deer, they absolutely eat it, but they don't strictly need it to survive. The short-faced bear didn't eat berries. By looking at their fossilized bones, scientists were able to figure out what these animals were eating, and the results showed almost zero traces of plant matter. The short-faced bear was eating meat. To clarify though, this is actually still debated a bit, and it is possible that the short-faced bear was capable of being an omnivore, but it's genuinely agreed upon that it heavily focused on meat. When you weigh 2,000 pounds and your body is entirely dependent on animal protein, you cannot survive by just eating a few squirrels or waiting to stumble across a dead carcass. A body that large just needs an unbelievable amount of food. Paleontologists estimate that to maintain its weight and stay alive, an adult short-faced bear needed to consume roughly 35 pounds of pure meat every single day. You weren't going to accidentally startle this thing while it was peacefully eating blueberries in a bush. This hyper-carnivore woke up every single morning with an immediate requirement to find and consume a massive amount of flesh. But this creates a pretty obvious question. How does a 2,000-pound animal actually catch enough prey to get 35 pounds of meat a day? If you look at the body of a grizzly bear, it's built like a tank. They have incredibly thick legs and their bodies are low to the ground. This gives them a low center of gravity, which is perfect for digging up roots, tearing apart rotting logs, and wrestling. Bears are supposed to be heavy and built for brute force. The short-faced bear threw that blueprint completely out the window. It had freakishly long legs. The proportions of its limbs looked completely wrong for a bear. Its front legs were so long that its back actually sloped downward towards its tail, giving it a posture that looked more like a giant hyena than a grizzly. And its feet were different too. Modern bears walk flat on the soles of their feet, just like we do. This is great for stability and supporting heavy weight, but it's terrible for running efficiently. The short-faced bear's toes were positioned differently. Its feet pointed straight forward, and its long legs were optimized for a forward-moving stride. Evolution took a 2,000-pound bear and basically just gave it the legs of a track star, which is a completely terrifying mental image. So, what happens if this thing actually sees you? Let's say you're dropped into Pliocene North America, and a short-faced bear decides you're going to be a part of its 35-pound daily meat quota. Now, I know the Beyond the Green audience is pretty tough, but what are your actual options for survival here? With a modern grizzly, the standard advice is usually to stand your ground, use bear spray, or in the absolute worst case scenario, play dead and hope it loses interest. If you play dead with a short-faced bear, you're just serving it dinner on a platter. It's actively looking for meat, and you just volunteered, which is probably not the survival strategy you want to go with. So, naturally, your instinct would be to run. But this is where those freakishly long legs become a massive problem for you. A modern grizzly can hit speeds of about 35 miles per hour in a short sprint, but they tire out quickly because they're flat-footed. Their flat-footed bodies aren't built for endurance. The short-faced bear was built exactly for that. Because of its long stride and forward-facing toes, researchers estimate that the short-faced bear could sustain speeds of 30 to 40 miles per hour, and it could easily hold that speed. Its long legs allowed it to cover massive amounts of ground highly efficiently. You cannot outrun it. So, what about climbing a tree? Black bears are great climbers, but adult grizzlies generally struggle to climb large trees because of their massive weight and short claws. But you have to remember the scale of the animal chasing you. You don't even have time to climb high enough. Before you even get 10 feet off the ground, the short-faced bear simply stands up on its hind legs, reaches 12 feet into the air, and pulls you back down. There's no running, there's no climbing, there's no out-enduring it. But despite having the perfect anatomy to chase down almost anything on the continent, some scientists believe the short-faced bear rarely actually ran after its own food. When you have a body built for high-speed endurance, it seems obvious that you'd use it to hunt. But running at 40 miles per hour burns an unbelievable amount of calories. And when your body already requires 35 pounds of meat a day just to exist, wasting energy on a long chase is an even worse problem. If you run for 3 miles and miss your prey, you're basically just starving yourself. So, some paleontologists have proposed a completely different theory for how this animal survived. They believe the short-faced bear was a kleptoparasite. Kleptoparasitism is basically just a fancy science word for letting other predators do all the hard work and then simply walking over and stealing it. Think about the environment of Ice Age North America. The plains were absolutely packed with other predators. You had packs of direwolves, American lions, and saber-toothed cats like the Smilodon. These animals were highly specialized hunters that spent massive amounts of energy taking down giant prey like bison, horses, and young mammoths. If you're a short-faced bear, why would you waste your precious energy chasing a horse when a pack of direwolves just killed one 2 miles away? Because of its towering height, the short-faced bear would have been able to see over the tail prairie grass for miles. It could spot a flock of scavenging birds circling a fresh kill in the distance, and thanks to its highly efficient legs, it could just casually jog over to the kill site without burning too much energy. And once it arrived, there was absolutely nothing the other predators could do about it. They either give up the food, or they become the food. Let's look at how a robbery like this actually plays out in the real world. Imagine a Smilodon, a 600-pound saber-toothed cat with serrated teeth, has just successfully taken down a bison. It's exhausted from the hunt and is just starting to eat. Suddenly, the grass parts and a short-faced bear walks into the clearing. You'd expect these two apex predators to engage in an epic battle to the death over the carcass. The saber-tooth leaping into the air, the bear swinging its massive claws. Except, there's no epic battle. The saber-toothed cat just leaves. A single animal, no matter how deadly its teeth are, isn't going to risk its life fighting a 2,000-pound bear that's literally twice its height. Even a pack of direwolves would immediately realize it's a completely lost cause. If they try to defend their kill, the bear is going to crush at least 2 or 3 of them before they even manage to scratch it. The short-faced bear doesn't even need to attack. It just walks up, stands on its hind legs to cast a 12-foot shadow over the area, and essentially says,
"This is mine now."
And the other predators have no choice but to walk away and go hunt something else. Okay, so this bear is 12 feet tall, runs 40 miles per hour, has the bite force of a lion, and effortlessly steals food from the deadliest predators on the continent. The defense is flawless, except it's not. In nature, every single extreme advantage usually comes with a catch. You cannot be a 2,000-pound tank and also have the slender legs of a marathon runner without sacrificing something critical in the process. And for the short-faced bear, that sacrifice was structural integrity. While its legs were incredibly long, the actual bones were surprisingly thin compared to the massive bones of a grizzly bear. They were built for forward momentum, not for absorbing heavy impacts. This created 2 massive problems for the bear. First, it couldn't turn. Those long legs were fantastic for running in a perfectly straight line, but they were terrible at literally any other direction. If you're running at 40 miles per hour on relatively thin legs, your center of gravity is dangerously high. If a prey animal suddenly cuts hard to the left, the short-faced bear physically cannot make that turn without completely snapping its leg. It has to slow down, turn around, and start running again. Second, it couldn't wrestle. Modern grizzlies hunt large prey by tackling it. They use their heavily muscled arms to grab a moose or an elk, drag it to the ground, and pin it down. If a short-faced bear tried to tackle a 1,500-pound Ice Age bison, the violent twisting of the struggle would likely snap the bear's long arm bones in half. And in the wild, if you break your leg, you're completely screwed. So, if it can't turn at high speeds, and it can't safely tackle heavy prey to the ground, how does it actually kill anything when it isn't stealing? If you have fragile legs and a high center of gravity, you have to be incredibly careful about what you choose to hunt. You cannot hunt animals that fight back, and you cannot hunt animals that zigzag through dense forests. So, the short-faced bear targeted the only thing it safely could: straight-line runners. During the Ice Age, the open plains of North America were filled with early species of wild horses and ancient camels. These animals don't fight back, and they don't try to dodge through trees. When they get scared, they just run in a straight line across the open prairie for as long as they possibly can. This was the exact prey the short-faced bear was built for. It didn't need to ambush them. It would just lock onto a horse, start its highly efficient run, and simply follow it. The bear didn't need to catch the horse immediately. It just needed to keep the horse running until the horse's lungs literally gave out. Once the prey was completely exhausted and it just couldn't run anymore, the bear would finally close the distance. It would simply walk up to the animal, use its highly leveraged jaws, and deliver one bone-crushing bite to the spine or the neck. It was a perfectly optimized system. Well, for the bear, not so much for the horse. So, for hundreds of thousands of years, the short-faced bear basically owned North America. It had a perfect hunting strategy, it stole whatever it wanted, and absolutely nothing was going to mess with it. But then, roughly 15,000 to 20,000 years ago, the environment started to shift, and a new animal crossed the Bering Land Bridge from Asia into North America: humans. When the first human populations arrived on this continent, they were walking directly into the territory of the largest mammalian land predator on Earth. Imagine being an early human hunter. You have survived the freezing temperatures of the Ice Age, you have crossed a massive glacier, and you're armed with nothing but a wooden spear tipped with a chipped piece of stone. You're used to hunting mammoths and avoiding wolves. And then you see a 12-foot tall bear looking at you over the top of the tall grass. We actually have real evidence that early humans ran into these things, though it's incredibly rare, and it makes perfect sense why it's rare. If you're a human with a pointy stick, you don't actively pick a fight with a 2,000-pound hypercarnivore that can run faster than you can blink. That's just a really bad career move. Humans likely spent thousands of years doing exactly what the saber-toothed cats did, avoiding this bear at all costs. But while the North American short-faced bear was terrifying, was it actually the biggest bear to ever exist? Now, technically speaking, if we're looking for the absolute heaviest bear in planetary history, the North American short-faced bear gets edged out by its cousin down south. During the Ice Age, a relative of the short-faced bear migrated into South America and evolved into a species called the Arctotherium. At its peak, Arctotherium was absolutely massive. Some estimates place the largest males at nearly 3,500 pounds, making it significantly heavier than the North American short-faced bear. But heavier didn't necessarily mean scarier. While Arctotherium started out as a giant meat-eater, South America was a very different environment. Over time, the massive prey animals began to disappear, and Arctotherium was forced to adapt. It slowly evolved to become more omnivorous. It started eating more plants, its body became much wider, and it lost the slender running legs of its northern cousin. It basically just turned into a sluggish scavenger that spent half its time eating vegetation. So yes, the South American bear was technically heavier, but the North American short-faced bear remained a pure 40-mile-per-hour meat-eating athlete. I don't know about you, but I'd much rather deal with a slow, fat bear eating leaves than a highly optimized track star that needs 35 pounds of my flesh just to survive the afternoon. So, if the North American short-faced bear was this fast, this big, and this dominant, why isn't it still here? It had no natural predators and could steal food from literally anything. It should have ruled the continent forever. But that's the problem with evolution. Being the biggest and the strongest only actually helps if the environment stays exactly the same. Around 11,000 years ago, the Ice Age began to end. The Earth began warming up, fast. And as the temperature changed, the plant life on the North American plains began to shift. The highly nutritious grasses that fed the massive herds of wild horses, camels, and giant bison started to die off, replaced by different vegetation and expanding forests. And when the grass died, the giant herbivores starved. Suddenly, the massive straight-line runners that the short-faced bear relied on were gone. The saber-toothed cats and direwolves were dying out too, which meant there were no kills left to steal. And this is where the short-faced bear's greatest strength became the exact reason it fell apart. The thing that made it completely unstoppable is exactly what killed it: When you weigh 2,000 pounds and require 35 pounds of pure meat every single day, you cannot just wait it out. You cannot survive on a few rabbits. You cannot survive on deer because deer dodge through the dense forests, and your fragile legs will snap if you try to chase them through the trees. And because your highly specialised lion jaw is built purely for snapping bones and tearing flesh, you physically cannot switch to eating berries or roots. The short-faced bear was too specialised. It was perfectly designed for a world that simply didn't exist anymore. Within a very short window of time, the most terrifying bear in human history just starved. But obviously, bears didn't go completely extinct in North America. While the 2,000-pound monster was starving, the weaker bears were doing just fine. The ancestors of modern grizzly bears and black bears were already living on the continent, and they survived the exact same climate shift that killed the short-faced bear. But why did they live when the apex predator died? Because they weren't picky. Modern bears are generalists. They have durable legs that let them dig for roots, and long noses that let them sniff out grubs and eat berries. When the giant herbivores died out, the grizzlies and black bears didn't care. They didn't need 35 pounds of fresh meat. They just shrugged and started eating nuts, bugs, dead fish, and eventually human garbage. Evolution doesn't always reward the biggest, the fastest, or the most terrifying animal. Often, nature aggressively punishes animals that only know how to do one thing. The short-faced bear was perfectly optimized for exactly one thing. But when the world changed, that optimization became useless. And in the end, the most terrifying bear to ever walk the earth was outsmarted by animals that were perfectly happy just eating out of a dumpster.